welcome guys, back here for video number 3 in our video series on planting your garden. We're benefited this time of year because we've got the greenhouse, and the greenhouse is full of so many plants. But here in video 3, we're going to spend some time talking to you about pests that you might encounter in the garden. So one of the first questions that I want to address are common pests that you might encounter. When we think of pests, we might think about insects first. But pests can be a number of different things. That could be deer or raccoons that are in your sweet corn. That could also be weeds that are overgrowing and taking over parts of your garden. Or obviously, like we mentioned before, that could also be your insects. So there's a lot of different types of pests that there could be. We're going to spend some time in a little bit talking about some types of pests in just a moment. But let's talk about ways first to prevent those pests. And some of those actions that we can take to prevent pests start before we plant the garden. And those would first be with soil. If we have a healthy, good soil, we can avoid some of the issues with pests. If we work with our soil and try to reduce the number of weed seeds in it, it will reduce the number of weeds that we deal with later on in our garden. So having a healthy soil bed is one of the first ways that you can start by avoiding pests. Another way that you can do this is to select disease or insect or pest resistant varieties. So if you go to a seed catalog or you look online, you can buy seeds that will help you avoid different pests that you might encounter in the garden. Another thing is sanitation, so regularly cleaning in your garden. And what this means, this could mean deadheading blooms or taking, when a bloom falls off, removing it from the plant, because as this is decomposing, it will attract other plants, or insects, to come and eat that decomposing matter. Obviously, if you weed in your garden, weeding in your garden is also going to be a form of sanitation that will help you avoid those pests later on. You also want to make sure that you plant your plants in the right place. So obviously, in certain gardens, if you put two types of crops together that are prominent for certain pests, they will thrive and grow off of each other because they're so close together. So plan your garden out. Before you even set that plant in the ground, plan out where am I going to plant things. Do your research about the pests that will invade or affect those. Use biological techniques to help prevent pests. I'm going to have Mr. Williams scan over here. Over here we have some marigolds. Marigolds are great biological plants that you can use to plant in your garden that will actually prevent other pests from coming in. There are certain insects that do not like marigolds, and so by planting those in your garden, especially around plants like tomatoes, will help you avoid certain types of pests that might affect your tomatoes, and one of those would be something like thrips. Another thing that you can do is rotate your crops and use plastic mulches. Plastic mulches will help you avoid things like weeds in your garden. And then obviously the last option that you would want to use is herbicides and pesticides. We want to use that as a last option. Number one, because it's the most expensive option, but you want to avoid those last. Then there's numbers of different pests, and there are hundreds of thousands of different pests that I could go into in terms of insects, but obviously there's a lot of big pests that you want to consider, such as whiteflies that will suck the sap from a stem of a plant. They affect cucumbers, lettuce, peas, peppers, squash, and tomatoes. Thrips are terrible in Kentucky for onions, so you want to try to select a variety of onions that is thrip resistant. Aphids can be terrible for things like peppers and tomatoes, so you can avoid those by a number of different herbicides or insecticides, or you can also consider some of those biological concerns. I love sweet corn. It's one of my favorite things that comes out of the garden, and every year we have to deal with earworms, corn earworms, and those are really hard to avoid. But some ways that you can do that are to plan early on how that you're preparing your soil. So there is a soil additive that you can add to your soil that's an insecticide that will help avoid those corn worms late in your harvest, and that way you won't have ear damage on your corn. And then lastly, a two-spotted spider mite is what we see when it causes a discoloration on our tomato plants once they get really pretty. Spider mites are really hard to get out of your crop once that they get in. They're so small and they can hide in those tiny places. But one of the ways to best prevent those is introduce a plant like a marigold so that will help you reduce those. And lastly, what's the difference between a herbicide and an insecticide? A herbicide is used to kill weeds and plants. They can be very specific in the sense that they will kill anything that they touch, or they can be designed just to kill certain plants. And then lastly, an insecticide is used to kill insects. But all of those herbicides and insecticides fall under the family of pesticides. I hope this video has been helpful. Mr. Williams is going to talk to you a little bit more about those pesticides.
Welcome back, guys. Like I said, we're out here at the Taylor County Greenhouse. Today we're going to be looking at is talking a little bit about some pests and how to treat pests in your gardens. Well, the first thing we want to look at doing is once you've identified your pests, you kind of look around, see what you have, flies, bugs, all that type of stuff. Just pick a good type of pesticide. The two that I recommend and for all gardens is either 7 or Orthene. 7 is a very common pesticide. It's easy to go and find. You can find it at Lowe's, you can find it at Walmart, you can go in southern states. Any of these feed stores typically have it. A lot of people like that because it's good, it takes care of it. Some people don't like it because they don't like the idea about getting it on your hands and stuff, because it is a dust. The one that I use is Orthene. Orthene is a very common pesticide, and you can go and find it at Walmart. You can find it also at Kroger, Lowe's, like I said, any of your feed stores around here. I use it because I could mix it up and I can apply it into a sprayer, and I can spray all that stuff as I need it. What I recommend on all these pesticides, once you select, follow the directions. There's a little packet that's on the back of each one of your all's bottles that you go and buy that tells you how to use it and when to use it. And the thing is, it's very easy to do. 7 dust, you typically apply, in 1 week, and it will stay on until you have the next rain. Orthene, they typically recommend it's about a 2-week spray. But I always caution, in case that you forgot that, you get this video, please read the directions on the back of your pesticides when you go and buy them. The second thing we'll talk about is, we found them. What do we need to go and do, to make sure we don't ever have these pests again, so you don't have to go and buy those pesticides. Rotate your crops. Once that you go through and the next year you go and put out that garden, don't put your crops in the same spots. Pests are one of those type creatures. They come back to the place of their birth. So if there's been eggs or something been laid on your vegetable garden, or for that matter your flowers and stuff, they're going to come back there next year. So the thing is, swap it around, rotate crops. This goes and prevents you from going and having issues with your garden every year. The next thing on there we're going to look at is what about water? When should I water? We recommend that you water in the morning. And the reason why we want to make sure you water in the morning is because pests are as active in the morning, and plants are constantly, they're starting to transpire. The thing is, if they're taking up water, they're getting ready for the day, and the thing is, this is a good time to go and apply your pesticides and things of that nature, to go through and make sure that you don't have any pest activity later on in that day when that plant is actually doing its work and making photosynthesis and things of that nature. The last thing is weeding. Everybody hates weeding. And it's one of those type things that we recommend that you keep a good weeded garden, because a weed can crowd out your vegetable plant. It can cause it to go and not be able to produce well. And when that plant is in distress, pests move in and they attack and they'll kill that plant. So it's a good possibility if you don't keep a good weeded garden, you'll go through and you'll have a very non-producing plant or no plant at all, and then you'll have a crop failure that year. Guys, I hope you enjoyed coming in the greenhouse today, and I hope you answered these questions well that Miss Wayne posted on there. And hopefully you'll have some successful time gardening. Thank you.